Now, there's been a war of words this week between the chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee, Andrew Hastie, and the former boss of ASIO DFAT and Defence, Dennis Richardson. First, Richardson gave a briefing to Federal Labor where he said Hastie's group, the Wolverines, adds no value to the Australia-China debate. Hastie then responded in true Hastie style on Sky News in an interview with Chris Kenny, where he criticised Richardson's record in dealing with authoritarian China. He was particularly critical of the Port of Darwin sale to a Chinese company, which he said happened under Richardson's watch. Have a quick look.
These are foreign policy elites who've set the agenda for the last 15 or 20 years, and they failed to appreciate the implications of an authoritarian China and an expansionist China, and now they don't want backbenchers having a view on this. Indeed, mainstream Australians. So you just have to look at their record, Chris, and I think it becomes pretty clear that they're pushing an angle of their own.
Pretty strong comments. Now, the former DFAT boss, Dennis Richardson, then returned fire, also on Sky News, rejecting the claim that he'd mismanaged the relationship with China.
And it concerns me, as it should a lot of people, that the chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee takes it upon himself to effectively imply that those who disagree with him are not loyal Australians.
Wanting to have the last word, I suspect Hastie responded again in a letter to his constituents where he upped the ante and called Richardson, and I quote, a tired foreign policy elite who has got it wrong for years. Here's what he wrote. Unfortunately, very few are willing to speak out about the threat of authoritarian states building economic and military ties. As recent news has shown, Labor leadership want concerned Australians to be silent about the rise of authoritarian regimes, even within their own party. He wrote, they prefer listening to tired foreign policy elites who have called it wrong for years. Joining me now to discuss this and other topics is the Australian Strategic Policy Institute Executive Director, Peter Jennings. Peter, welcome to the program. Do you agree with Andrew Hastie that foreign policy elites have got it wrong for years when it comes to Chinese influence in Australia?
Well, I think we've had an approach which worked for quite a while when China was sort of hiding its more authoritarian demeanour. And enabled Australia to get wealthy as China grew. But the fact of the matter is that's not been the reality really since 2012 when Xi Jinping came to power. And, you know, the idea that we could continue that policy, look the other way, not say anything negative, not have any criticisms of China's human rights abuses, not say anything about China's increasingly aggressive behaviour in the South China Sea and elsewhere, that's no longer sustainable. You know, I applaud Andrew Hastie and a number of other MPs who are now prepared to call things as they are. I think that's right. And, you know, it's simply not appropriate to say that that type of discussion is unhelpful. I think we need to have a really robust discussion about how China is behaving and about what our policy settings should be. And if you're going to dip into the public debate, you have to have broad shoulders, Sharri. You've got to be prepared to take the criticism and, you know, say what you think. I think that's the right thing to do.
Who do you blame for the Port of Darwin sale, and why do you think it was allowed to go ahead?
Well, the Port of Darwin sale was, I think, a comedy of errors from a federal government point of view. Most of the Defence Department consideration of the sale back in 2015 was really around whether or not they had the authority, the Foreign Investment Review Board had the authority to step in and to prevent the sale taking place or the lease taking place from the Northern Territory government. And it turned out that there was a gap in the legislation which meant that the Foreign Investment Review Board did not have to come to a judgment, and the sale went through. I, in the last few weeks, have heard the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, Matt Canavan and a number of others besides all say under the Foreign Investment Review system that has been put in place in the last few weeks, the lease would not have gone ahead. So I think it was an error at the time. And I think Defence made a mistake in taking a very narrow approach to understanding what was going on, talking about how it impacted on the very small naval base that we have up in the Port of Darwin. Yep. And not wanting to talk to government about the broader national security implications.
Now, this week at one of the Prime Minister's press conferences, we saw a Chinese state journalist come and show some quite unusual behaviour, taking photographs of other journalists. Without commenting on her specifically, I understand you also had some unusual activity outside your office this week. What happened?
Yes, we did, Sharri. At the beginning of the week, we had a number of people who were taking photographs of the main entranceway to my building in Barton in the ACT. A member of staff approached them and said, "Who are you?" And a female with a camera said that she was actually a student and just photographing a very beautiful building in the ACT. I must say our office is, it's very nice, but it's a pretty average kind of office.
Definitely not worth photographing. But what's your general comment on, the use of China, and obviously not commenting on this specific woman who turned up to the PM's press conference, but, are sometimes journalists working for the state media used in unusual ways by China?
China's intelligence services is known to send people out around the world under the cover of different professional guises, not necessarily actually operating as undeclared officers in Chinese embassies, but through state media outlets, for example. So I simply don't know who these people are, but I can tell you the person who was describing herself as a student, we had some photographs of our mailbox, for example, appear on a Xinhua news story a couple of days later online. Things are never entirely what they seem when you're dealing with the Chinese Communist Party, and I think that, it should be investigated, perhaps, just who exactly are these people.